Hello and welcome to another educational video about screen printing by Catspit Productions. Today's video is a quick tips video. Quick tips for screen printing. Now, I am often asked a lot about where I coat my screens or what I use as a darkroom. And also a resulting question of that question is, how do I dry my emulsion coated screens? And then further after that is, how do I store my emulsion coated screens? So today is a quick tip video, and I just wanted to share with you how I do it. Now, the deal is that I do not have a darkroom. My entire shop is the darkroom. Okay, so what I do is I turn out all the lights, and I have red lights that are positioned strategically, shall we say, throughout the shop that basically turn the entire shop into a darkroom. And my exposure unit is right over there, directly across from me, right next to the camera. And I have a light-safe drying box, which you may have seen a previous video about, in which I actually built the light-safe drying box out of a normal screen drying rack using corrugated plastic and gaffers tape. You can look in my video collection for that. So today I just wanted to let's note a couple of things really quick. First of all, when you're coating, you have different choices of scoop coaters. The better quality scoop coater you use is going to be better off for you in the end. In other words, buy a decent scoop coater. I like this one that stands up. Make sure your edges are smooth. Okay, that's number one. Number two, you're going to always coat, and this is important. You're going to always coat on the substrate side. This is the substrate side, the side that is flat. The side that comes in contact with your t-shirt is the substrate side. So you're always going to start with the coat, one coat on this side, and then you're going to flip it around and you're going to do a final coat on the inside. Okay? And this is important. People often ask me, is it necessary to do two coats? Yes, it is, because that way you're encapsulating both sides of the mesh. And also what happens is by coating the substrate side first and then coating the inkwell side second, what's happening is you're pushing the majority of the emulsion deposit to the substrate side. Okay, now what that does is that means that the emulsion over mesh ratio on the substrate side is high, meaning that when you do your stencil, when you wash out your stencil, you expose your screen and you wash out your stencil in the washout booth, the thickest part of the stencil is going to be on the substrate side, which is what comes in contact with your t-shirt. The thicker the stencil is, allowing for more ink to have room to sit between the stencil, the mesh, and the t-shirt, the better coverage you're going to get. Okay, now this is where we come to, well, okay, you're going to coat the screen. Well, where do you dry it? How do you dry them? And then when they're dry, how do you store them? Okay, let's turn out all the lights, and I'm going to show you where and how I store my either freshly coated emulsion screens. Is that right? My freshly emulsion coated screens? Or the screens once they're dry, where do I leave them? Well, I leave them in the same cabinet. So let's turn the shop into a darkroom and take a look at the cabinet. And I have to forewarn you, the cabinet is well used and it needs refurbishing. So we're probably going to do a video about doing some refurbishing work to the cabinet in the future. So let's switch over to darkroom mode. So this is what happens when my shop turns into a darkroom. You can barely see me, which is probably to your benefit, so that you don't have to watch my ugly mug any more than I have to force you to in order to learn how to screen print t-shirts. So maybe we should do some more darkroom sessions for you, right? Okay, so here's the drying box right over here. All right, here's my exposure table right here. So they're right next to each other. And I also have another screen rack over here which holds screens that are either ready to be mesh prepped or screens that have stencils on that I like to keep. Okay, so obviously we can't see much like this, so what I'm going to do is we're going to open up the dry box and I'm going to show you what screens. I'm not sure exactly what screens I have in there. We're gonna check it out, and I'm going to show you how they're placed in there for drying and storage. Okay, here's a whole shot of the screen drying rack with the door wide open next to the exposure unit. And now I'm going to put the camera on the stand so that we can take a close-up look of how the screens sit in the rack. Okay, so here you go. You can see how I store my screens. This is where I will store the freshly emulsion-coated screens to dry. And once they're dry, I leave them in here to store, just the way they are. Now you'll notice that I do mark, for the most part, I mark what mesh count it is on the edge so that I can see. And the most important thing that I wanted to note about storing your freshly emulsion-coated screens right after you coat them with emulsion is you want to store them like this, with the inkwell side up. Substrate side, which comes in contact with the t-shirt, is on the bottom. And what that does is that gives us the advantage of after we've made our first pass coat on the substrate side and we made our second pass coat on the inkwell side, all the emulsion tends to be deposited on the substrate side. So if you store this in any other fashion, you're not going to get the benefit of the gravity, which will tend to pull the emulsion to the maximum on the substrate side, giving you the highest emulsion over mesh ratio. So the answer to the question is whether they are dry or wet, this is how I store them. Just like that, always with the inkwell side up. Always. Never any other way. And it's a very good idea to make sure that your dry rack is level, and also make sure that it has proper ventilation, because if it gets too humid in here, you can get dimpling and dwelling and stuff. Okay? So, as you can see, it's not always necessary that you have a completely dedicated darkroom for your screen printing shop. As you can see, I do not, and it works out just fine for me. I have a small enough shop that the shop itself can double as a darkroom. And it's also important to remember that if you build your own light safe dry box, first of all, make sure that it's light safe. Test it for light safeness before you coat a bunch of screens and try to use it. And secondly, make sure that you build it out of materials that are not going to produce dust, like wood. If you use wood to make a screen drying rack, sand it and then paint it very well, inside and out. And that will eliminate a lot of the wood dust fibers that could cause problems. Because remember, after you coat your screen, you go through the mesh prep and you coat everything and you put it in that dry box. You don't want any dust, dirt, debris, or anything to come in contact with the emulsion, because that causes pinholes or problems in your stencils. Okay? So I hope that helped out. I know my quick tips videos originally were meant to be a little bit shorter, but as far as information goes for screen printing, I think more is better. And if you agree with that, comment below. More is better. Okay? Thanks a lot for watching. If you like what you see, please leave a comment, and of course, rate, thumbs up, and please subscribe. I appreciate that a lot. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.